Spooky fans, Michael here. Many of you are likely now done with school for the school year, and if so, congratulations. If not, you're almost there, I wish you the best, but it's now pretty much summertime for most people, and since it is summer, it's time to bust out the tank top. So if you want an MandJTV tank top like the one I'm wearing, you can pick one up using the link down in the description below to check out my merch store. And of course, there's other stuff that you can get there too. Unless you happen to live under a rock, you likely heard about the big Pokemon news that was announced earlier this week. Yes, there's Pokken Tournament Deluxe coming to the Nintendo Switch, and Gold and Silver being released on the Virtual Console, but the biggest news was Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, the next main series games releasing worldwide on the Nintendo 3DS this November. These games are also going to be taking place in the Alola region, but they're supposedly an alternate storyline and what appears to be taking place in an alternate universe. In the trailer, Masuda mentions that the games will include Pokemon that did not appear in the original titles. Now, while this could be referring to the new Necrozma forms of Solgaleo and Lunala, or the Alola Dex being different and including different older Pokemon, I think that this is a pretty good hint toward there being an introduction of different Alola forms. Alola forms were one of the biggest introductions in Gen 7, giving different alternate region forms to some old Pokemon, altering their types and biology and a bunch of different things. This is personally my favorite introduction in Gen 7, in addition to all the new Pokemon of course, but it bears a lot of similarity to the Gen 6 introduction of Mega Evolution. New forms of old Pokemon as a way to kind of bring those Pokemon back into relevance. X and Y were the first installations in Gen 6, but the second ones, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, introduced more Mega Evolutions into the Pokemon world, so adding on to the big introduction that Gen 6 brought. Because of this, since Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are the second installations in Gen 7, I think they're also going to bring a lot more of the big Gen 7 introduction, and therefore bring a lot more Alola forms. This of course works perfectly, especially since the games are taking place in Alola, since a regional variance would be tougher to justify if we got Sinnoh remakes instead. The idea of getting a lot more Alola forms is really exciting for me since I adore Alola forms, so because of that, I decided to make a video counting down the top 10 Pokemon that I would love to see get Alola forms, and some speculation on what their Alola forms could be. I made a similar video last fall speculating Alola forms for Sun and Moon, and this video will include some of the Pokemon from that list, but most of them will be brand new Pokemon that I have not discussed before. I'm going to be limiting this list to Pokemon that were unobtainable in Sun and Moon, since those are the Pokemon that I think are the most likely to get Alola forms. Like I mentioned earlier, Masuda says that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon will include Pokemon that did not appear in the original titles. And so since these Pokemon weren't in the original Sun and Moon, I think they're the most likely to get Alola forms in this game. Also, I'm only going to be discussing final evolutions, since while it's likely that a lot of the pre-evolutions would get Alola forms as well, as we saw with Cubone and Marowak or Execute and Exeggutor, that's not necessarily guaranteed, so I'm only going to be focusing on the final evolutions. So be sure to leave a like on the video, comment below what Pokemon you think should get Alola forms, and subscribe if you haven't already, and without further ado, here are the top 10 possible new Alola forms for Pokemon Ultra Sun and Pokemon Ultra Moon. Number 10. Ursaring. Every Pokemon that got an Alola form in Pokemon Sun and Moon was a Pokemon that originated from the Kanto region. Interestingly, in the same year that Sun and Moon came out, Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow were released for the Virtual Console, therefore giving players an easy way to transfer the original versions of some of those Alola form Pokemon into their Sun and Moon games. Gold and Silver are releasing for the Virtual Console around 2 months before the release of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, so because of that, I believe that most of the Pokemon getting Alola forms in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon will be Pokemon from Johto, since people playing through their Gold and Silver games on their 3DSs will have an easy way of transferring the original versions of those Pokemon into Sun and Moon. Ursaring would be a great candidate for an Alola form since it is a Johto Pokemon, but it's also a Pokemon that's pretty cool and hasn't really been relevant in the Pokemon world for quite some time. I could see them altering Ursaring from being based on a grizzly bear, a bear that's more in colder climates, to being based on a sun bear, one of the most tropical climate bears. Sun bears have really cool orange colored markings on their necks and faces, and I could easily see them doing the same thing on Ursaring, turning it into a fire type. Sun bear, fire type, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Number 9, Forretress. Forretress is another really cool Johto Pokemon that I'd love to see get a more tropical design. Pineco and Forretress are originally based on bagworms inhabiting pine cones or discarded shells. But what if when they came to the Alola region, they inhabited different, more tropical plants, and their biology ended up fusing with those plants that they're inhabiting? I'd love to see Forretress turn into more of a coconut-based Pokemon, not only because I think that would be very entertaining, but it also fits with the tropical climate, and it could change into a bug grass type or maybe even a grass steel type. And if you think making Forretress into a coconut is less intimidating, just remember that every year more people die from falling coconuts than from shark attacks, so it would still kick a lot of booty. Number 8, Weezing. Admittedly, I do think more Kanto Pokemon getting Alola forms is substantially less likely than Johto Pokemon, but I do still think there is a chance, and if they do give more Kanto Pokemon Alola forms, I would love to see Weezing get one. Weezing is a result of toxic and gross polluted air. However, Alola is known for having much cleaner and fresh air than a lot of other places in the world. What if wheezing and coughing came to the Alola region and the much cleaner air there altered their biology so they became more of like Pokemon versions of clean air particles? This transformation would change Weezing from being a poison type to either a normal or a flying type, ideally pure flying type because we definitely need more of those. And it would probably end up being a much happier Pokemon. I'm not really good enough at Photoshop to change its facial expression, but it definitely would change. Number 7, Mantine. Mantine is a Pokemon that I was honestly surprised could not be found in the Alola region. It's based on manta rays and manta rays like tropical waters, so it seems like a perfect fit to live in Alola. Since Ultra Sun and Moon are going to take place in a different universe than Sun and Moon, I think it'd be really cool if they reintroduced Mantine to the Alola region, but instead with an Alola form. I don't foresee it losing its water typing since that would mean a pretty drastic change in its physical biology, but I could see it losing its flying typing due to a change in its lifestyle. Mantine is known for leaping out of the water and gliding for a period of time, but what if there was a reason for it to stop doing that? JW Nuts on DeviantArt predicted that a larger amount of predators in the shallower areas of the water, such as Carvanha or Sharpedo, would lead Mantine to have to go down to the deeper areas of the water and camouflage. Mantike and Mantine could turn into water ground types, gaining a tan coloring for more adequate camouflage in the sand, and they lose their flying type since they really don't have a need anymore for jumping out of the water since there's all those Carvanhas and Sharpedos there. Number 6, Arbok. Arbok is a Pokemon that I did discuss in my original top 5 possible Alola forms video, and since we didn't get it in Sun and Moon, you can't even catch an Arbok in Sun and Moon, I'm talking about it again because I still really want it. I've said many times before that I really like reptilian Pokemon, and Ekans and Arbok are no exception. I think they're really cool snake Pokemon that really deserve some extra attention, so Alola forms would be perfect for them to get. Like I said before, I would love to see them either become or just gain the water type, becoming pure water type or water poison type. They could be based on sea snakes, which are definitely prevalent in tropical waters, and it would make fishing a lot more entertaining, because I don't recall any place in Pokemon where you fish and you pull up a snake, other than a Dratini or a Dragonair, but those aren't really snakes, they're dragons. Number 5. Breloom. I will be the first to admit that Alola forms of Hoenn Pokemon seem pretty unlikely, but if we get just one Alola form in all of Hoenn, I really want it to be Breloom. Breloom is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, and I think it looks really cool and has a really interesting design, and I'd love to see it get an alteration in its design as a way to kind of give it some of the credit that it really deserves. I would love to see Breloom become a poison dark type Pokemon. I know that sounds really edgy, which Breloom really isn't, but hear me out. The Pokédex says that Breloom really likes hot and humid climates. If Breloom became prevalent in Alola, which has an even more hot and humid climate than Hoenn, I could see Breloom becoming really powerful and adapting to the climate and becoming a lot stronger. Therefore, the spores that it exhausts from its body could become even more potent, transforming its biology from being a grass-type Pokemon into a poison-type Pokemon. This extra power changes Breloom's nature to be a lot more aggressive and ferocious, therefore changing its fighting type into a dark type. That would also help a lot with hiding in the shadows of the lush jungle to hunt down its prey, because I could see it becoming a carnivore as well. Like I said, I don't think this is particularly likely, but that doesn't change the fact that having an evil, aggressive, poison Breloom would be something that I would really like to see. Number 4, Donphan. Donphan was another Pokemon on my first Possible Alola Forms video, but it was number 5, right below Arbok. However, for this video, I decided that Donphan should pass up Arbok, since, like I said, Johto seems more likely than Kanto now, so now Donphan's higher. I've always thought Donphan was a really cool Pokemon with a really interesting design. If you were going to tell me that you were going to make a Pokemon that was a combination of an elephant and a truck tire, I would be like, how could that possibly look good? But then somehow, Donphan looks good. Like before, I think it would be cool to see Donphan change into a grass type, changing its habitat from a rugged terrain to a more forest environment. This would also be a cool way for it to change from more of a rubber tire Pokemon to a wooden wheel Pokemon, fitting perfectly with the grass type. And it would also be a nice contrast between African and Indian elephants, since African elephants, like the original Donphan, tend to live in more rugged savanna terrain, whereas Indian elephants live more in the forest. So maybe this Donphan could get smaller ears too. I don't know. I really want to see an Alolan Donphan. Number 3, Yanmega. Okay, Yanmega is technically not a Johto Pokemon, but Yanma is. And if Yanma got one, Yanmega would have to also, so this still counts. I've always liked Yanmega. I think it's a really cool Pokemon with a really intimidating, aggressive design, and it's up there as one of my favorite Bug-type Pokemon. Doesn't surpass Vikavolt, of course, but it's up there. Yanmega is based on giant prehistoric dragonflies, which, according to Wikipedia, were able to achieve such massive sizes because of more oxygen in the air and a lack of natural predators. If Yanmega came to the Alola region, it would have access to much more oxygen and fresher air, but it would have a lot more natural predators. The amount of bird Pokemon in Sinnoh is substantially fewer than the amount of bird Pokemon in Alola, so it would have to learn to adapt with many more predators. You've probably heard of the fight or flight reaction, where if you get into a sticky situation, your instincts tell you to either fight back or run away. I personally think Yanmega, while it is a flying type, is less likely to fly than it is to fight. Faced with more natural predators, I could see Yanmega evolving to become more of an aggressive and capable fighter, and I think the coolest way for them to achieve that would be making it a bug-dragon type. People for years have said that Yanmega should be a bug-dragon type since it's really aggressive, spiky, and based on a dragonfly, and I think giving it a Alolan form with maybe more dragon-like appearances and making it more aggressive and fighting capable would be the perfect way to do that. Also, it would finally give us a bug-dragon type Pokemon, which is something I have wanted for a long time, so this may be a little bit of wishful thinking, but I would love to see an Alolan Yanmega that was bug-dragon type. Number 2, Neato Queen and Neato King. Technically 2 Pokemon, yes. But if one got one, the other one would too, so it makes sense to group them together. Neato Queen and Neato King were the number 1 Pokemon on my old list, and they still are Pokemon that I would really love to see get Alola forms. I think they're really cool, they're some of my favorite Kanto Pokemon, they have such creative designs, and they haven't been all that relevant in the Pokemon world for a while, so giving Alola forms to them would be perfect. As I mentioned with Yanmega, Alola has a lot more natural predators in the form of bird Pokemon than pretty much any other region. And since birds eat mice, Nidorans would have to deal with a lot more natural predators. Because of that, I could see them evolving to become a Steel-type Pokemon, which would make perfect sense since Neato Queen and Neato King already have a pretty armored-looking appearance. I could also see them turning into Fire types. Nidoran exploring volcanic regions would likely change into a Fire type to deal with the heat, and it would lose its Poison type since Poison isn't going to be all that useful against Pokemon in fire regions since they already can deal with toxic volcanic gases. However they alter the types of these guys, I'm sure it would look really awesome and really badass. unless they made them fairy types, in which case that would just... Could you imagine a fairy type Nidoking? That would not work. Number 1, Gliscor. Like Yanmega, Gliscor is not a Johto Pokemon, but Gligar is, so it still works. Gliscor is one of my favorite Pokemon. It looks really awesome, is pretty powerful, and hasn't been all that relevant for a while, so it getting an Alola form would be perfect for it. I think a perfect Alola form for Gliscor would be turning it into an electric type. Hear me out. So, Gligar and Gliscor are desert Pokemon, so they would likely start out living in the Haina Desert. However, since unlike the rest of the Pokemon that live in that desert, Gligar and Gliscor can fly. Because of their exploratory tendencies, they would likely end up going over to Blush Mountain, right near the geothermal power plant. Spending time around a power plant and other electric-type Pokemon would likely convert their biology into them being electric types. They could even change it so that they get their main nutrients by feeding off of the electricity around the power plant. Of the two types that they have, ground and flying, I think they're more likely to have the ground type replaced by electric, since if you're immune to electricity, it's gonna be kinda hard to absorb it for nutrients. Also, electric flying type is better in battle than electric ground, and I want Gliscor to be good, so... yeah, electric flying is where I'm gonna go with this. But no matter what typing they would decide to give an Alolan Gliscor, if we got an Alolan Gliscor, I would be ecstatic, since it's a Pokemon that I really love, and I think it really deserves some extra attention. So there we have it. Those are my top 10 possible Alola forms for Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Now, while it's not confirmed that we'll be getting new Alola forms, I really hope we do, since I really love the concept of Alola forms, and even if we don't get any of the ones that I mentioned on this list, but we do get other ones, I will still be ecstatic. What did you think of this video? Do you agree with my list? What are some other Pokemon that you think should get Alola forms in the new games? Let me know in the comments below! And if you like this video, be sure to leave a like, and if you haven't already, you should definitely subscribe for more fun Pokemon content of all kinds, and your central hub for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon hype. If you're interested in any of my content in other places, I have a second channel where I post some non-Pokemon content, I have a Twitch where I stream very regularly with my girlfriend, and I have a Patreon where if you decide to support me, you can get some exclusive content from that, and links to all of those things are down in the description below. Alright, that's all I have for now, so till next time, Poke fans, gotta catch them all!